One of them comes from iPads. And the important thing to know about iPads, and why I spend as much time as I do every year talking about iPads, is that...
Oh, hold on. I gotta put this in it. We use it for a different one. Okay, now try it.
Just everything.
Try this one.
One of them, I think this one may work.
It's working now?
Okay. Is that this is mandatory for all post-secondary education institutions. That is to say, if you want to have Title IV funding, which most of us do in order to stay in business, this is something we're all required to do. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind, is we don't have a lot of choice over this. And for the last 10 years or so, there's been a report that is generated every year. This year's looks like this. They always have these ugly colors and some sort of garish color scheme, and the entire report is like that. I spared you that and have redone it so that you don't have to look at those colors. But this is what this year's looks like. It gets mailed to the president's office of every college in America, and it has our performance on a bunch of benchmarks that we didn't get to choose against a group of colleges that are similar to ourselves. And the thing that's important to know about this particular report is it's absolutely public. If you knew where to go look, every single one of you could, after this meeting, go and take this exact report and print it out for yourselves and take it and have all those numbers available. And that's true for anyone in the general public. So it's really important that people understand what some of these numbers are and what they mean, because they may be odd compared to what you're expecting to see. And one of the things, my main objectives here is to talk about what does this look like and why does it mean, or what does it show the way it does. This is the comparison group that we use now for the last 4 or 5 years. For iPads, we've refocused our comparison group to be a very small group of colleges with which we have the most similarity across the country. As you can see in orange, there are 7 other technical colleges, basically the other mid-sized ones, on this list. So when we talk about our comparison group, that's who it is. Some of these things are not a real surprise. The rate of ethnicity, we've seen these numbers before. The gender balance, we tend to have fewer females and more males. There's some reasons for that, but in the interest of time, I'm going to skip a couple of these things a little bit. So enrollment. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any control over how these things are set up. And so they sometimes do confusing things like putting 2 years on one slide. So in this case, they're looking at head count for the entire year of students enrolled in credit courses. And so because it needed a full year, the last one that was available was 2012-13. However, for fall enrollment, we were able to hit the fall of 13-14. So you had 2 years on one slide. They do this kind of a lot, but they are sort of laid out in this way. So just keep in mind that sometimes you're looking at numbers that seem like maybe they should add up, and they're not going to. Okay? So we have more students as a total head count, but we don't have as many FTE as our comparison group. It's close, it's not the same. But a big reason for that is that we have a lot more part-time students than we do full-time students. Well, one of the reasons for that is that in iPads, we include all of those high school dual enrollment students. They are all going to be part-time, and so that's going to skew some of these numbers and give us some of the things that look the way that they do. As far as degrees are awarded, in terms of associate degrees, we're actually quite similar to our comparison group, but in certificate programs, we offer many more certificates than our comparison groups do. Now, I have to tell you that Wisconsin is the only state that does this. We use the word certificate the way everyone else uses the word diploma, and vice versa. So this certificates means our technical diploma programs, as well as any ATCs that still exist, and apprenticeship programs. So basically only state-approved programs appear anywhere in this listing. Tuition and fees, as you can see here, we kind of stayed on balance with our comparison group. We've all gone up by kind of a similar amount. That price of attendance is then going a step beyond tuition and fees and gets into how much does it cost to live in the place and how much does it cost to buy books and to drive back and forth and those kinds of things. And here again, I think you'll see I think it was 17% of the gap here between ourselves and our comparison group. But we've both been kind of growing at sort of a steady rate. The interesting thing here to me is that last year this number was really different. And inexplicably, they just corrected it this year, and it went up by 13%. Last year, it looked like we had gone up and everyone else had gone down, and we were trying to explain that. And now they just quietly fixed it. So apparently, getting Pell Grants as our comparison group, but last year this was 58%. So actually, our comparison group is coming down to where we were. Not quite as many students. This is, I should point out, our first-time full-time cohort. So those are the students we count for the graduation rate survey. These aren't all of our students. As far as how many they get, and then more students get loans. You've heard me say this probably before. But interestingly, just as this number came down last year this was 23%. So what's happened is that at other colleges, as fewer students qualify for Pell, more students are having to take loans. Another thing that says is we probably don't serve quite as many economically disadvantaged students as our peers do. This is now the amount of those loans, and you'll see for Pell, those rules are pretty tight, so the amounts are very different, but it is somewhat different, especially on the federal loan side. Our students take out a higher average loan amount, but recall our cost of attendance was also higher, so maybe that follows. There is also the data about all students, so that includes the students who are being prorated for being part-time and everything else, but the patterns really look exactly the same, so I'm not going to take time to show you those separately. Now, the things that probably are most interesting are all squished into one slide here, and that is our graduation rates and our retention rates. So, first off, our first-time full-time graduation rate was 28%. In most years recently, that has been 30%, but this year it was 28%. It's been in that range before. It is still 5 percentage points better than the median of that comparison group I showed you earlier on. So that's pretty nice. Our transfer out rate is not quite as high. That has been the case forever. In some ways, I think it reflects probably a different kind of institution that we are than, say, a community college might be. But I will say this is transfer out for non-graduates, not transfer out after graduation. This number simply tells you that the total number of students that are included in our cohort that we're counting is a very small number. And the problem with that is a couple. First off, it means that we often have only 300 students that we're basing some of these really important metrics on. And with being small numbers like that, they tend to bounce around a lot. So that's one of the issues that we have. Retention, 70% to 63% for first-time, full-time retention from fall to the following fall. And then first-time, part-time retention. Both of these numbers are up 6% from last year. And both of these numbers are considerably better than our comparison group. So that's kind of nice. Time to degree completion, I'm not really sure what exactly to call this. This just has to do with how many students graduated 100% of the time, 150%, 200% of the time. But I just kind of go with that. So, staff FTE. This is one of the things that iPads kind of does very simplistically, and as a result, it doesn't make us look very good. So, in staff FTE, the total number of part-time staff that you have is divided by 3, and that's considered full-time FTE. Most of our part-time staff are teaching much lower loads than that. So our staff numbers always get really inflated in iPads. So this makes us look like we have more than twice as many faculty as our comparison group. Now, it is true we have about 190 actual full-time faculty. So in fact, we do have many more faculty. In management probably sort of reflects the fact that that size of this number. Why is that? I'll talk about that in just a couple of minutes. This is also another factor to consider is that our average salaries of instructors tends to be about 35% better than the comparison group. It is, we only went up by about 1% last year versus 4.9% here. But when you put together the fact that we have more staff and they have higher salaries, what happens is our cost per FTE is very large, more than double and almost triple what the median is for the other institutions. And it always makes me nervous that this is the case, which is why I always take a lot of time to talk about it. You'll also see some of these other costs are kind of on the higher side. Some of these have gone up considerably in the last year. This has basically not moved very much. This has been a stable thing. And it's not just Waukesha. It is every technical college in the state of Wisconsin. It's functionally the way that we are designed that's different. In particular, the big issue that we have is that there's about 20 states that have technical colleges. But we're the only state in which the technical college system does all the non-credit work. We do the remedial education, We do the community enrichment education. We do a lot of stuff that generates costs and not a single FTE. And so that automatically puts us out of whack on the cost per FTE equation. Another thing about Waukesha is that we don't have a transfer program, so we don't offer very much general education. So we have the courses that we do, but we don't have anthropology, and we don't have French. Those are things that tend to be inexpensive to offer. And so we have a lot of the things that are expensive to offer, and we can't offer a lot of things that would be less expensive to balance because UW-Waukesha offers those. So that's always a second factor that we have to deal with. And then in Wisconsin, we also invest in work experience. And so our faculty all have to have work experience. That also means we're hiring people who are out of industry and competing with industry, all of which ends up causing our costs to rise. And so if you look at it, we actually are only the 8th highest in the technical college system for cost per FTE, but we are ranked 18th in the country out of, anyone want to guess? 1,730 institutions. So this always makes me really nervous because this is out there. And anyone in the world can find it, and so far no one hasn't. There's reasons for it. And every single technical college is in the top 50, and this has been the case. It's actually better than it was. 2 years ago, 9 of the top 12 institutions in the country at cost per FTE were all in the technical college system. It's structural for the way that we do it and the way we divide the labor in Wisconsin, but it doesn't look good if all you pull is a number. And so now you know. Okay, so I'm going to switch now to the National Community College Benchmarking Project, which is something that we choose to do, and it's good. It's the best, really, benchmarking we can get. There's 261 colleges that take part. They're all public 2-year institutions. It gives us a very big variety of potential colleges to benchmark. So it is, we also give us the contrast. We have a focus group for the iPads, and then we have kind of a broad group for here, and we get better comparison points. I'll be able to show you where the top 10% of institutions do, and where the bottom 10% of institutions do, and you can see where you fall in between, whereas in iPads you don't have all of those things. We also use this extensively because our AQUIP accreditation requires us to do benchmarking, and we've done this since 2007. But at this point, everyone is sick of listening. And so I'd like to propose that we play a game. So this is why there are cards out. We're going to play a game, and of course it's on theme. The game is how well do you know WCTC? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the best of the benchmarks that we have. But I'm not just going to tell you what we did. I'm going to make you all tell me first which you think we do well at, which you think we need improvement at, and which we kind of fall in between. So there's going to be a green card, and so I'm going to explain a benchmark, and if you think this is something we do well, I want you to hold up your green card. If you think it's something that needs improvement, I want you to hold up the yellow card, and then if it's something in between, where we're kind of along with most of the group, then hold up your blue card. Yes, I understand these are not the colors of a stoplight, but that's intentional, because there's a lot of excess meaning that goes into stoplight colors. If you think about it, red tends to make people go, whoa, that's bad, you gotta stop doing something because that's bad. And that's not really fair to say if you're in the bottom. And I think for the purposes, I would say if we're in the top quarter, top 25%, then we'll call that green. If we're in the bottom 25%, we'll call that yellow. Well, really what that says is it's something we should look at. So yellow really is the appropriate color for being at the bottom. So then that leaves a nice neutral blue. So I understand I have to shift our thinking a little bit. It also doesn't help that we have yellow, green, and blue cards left over from the presidential speech. Didn't want to have go to waste. That would not be fiscally responsible. So the first one, for instance, is one I've already shown you, so that I'm just going to kind of walk through how this works. But the question is how does WCTC fare? So in this case, I would tell you that this is a green card. Because even though we were at 28.3% last year, and that was kind of on the downside of where we usually fall, we have been on the 80th to the 84th percentile throughout the last 5 years. So we really actually do very well on graduation rate. Now that number may not be impressive, you were discussing at the beginning about the fact that people giving more scrutiny to what those numbers are. Let me just walk through how these kind of slides are organized, because there's going to be a few like this. This traditional WCTC rust color is WCTC's actual performance. Then this is where the bottom 10% of colleges was, where the middle, and then the top 10%, or the 90th percentile, where they would fall. And then this is the percentile rank as the purple line, okay? So the first one then that I want you to think about is graduation and transfer. So this is going to be combining two things that actually I've kind of already shown you both. But you have actually graduation in front of you. Graduation and transfer together. Is that something that WCTC does well, needs to do better, or is kind of in the middle? And I'll tell you that you will use all of your cards at some point, so don't be afraid to use yellows and greens. Okay, so the best answer would be blue, or average. So we're about 41%. So because, and I showed you this earlier, that our transfer rates are not quite as high as our graduation rates, then we end up falling up closer to the middle on this particular one. So then the next one I'll ask you about is graduate outcomes. So there's a couple things on the slide, but the one I want you to think about is related employment. So of our graduates, how many get related employment? Is that a good thing? Okay. So I see a lot of green going up on that one. The best answer, so in this case, the orange numbers are the ones that are related employment, and the percentile rank is here. So we are 32nd percentile on related employment. So that is just barely blue. Okay?
I'm quitting.
But you, okay. No, I'm glad you were on. Because I almost made it yellow. Yeah. So, okay. The thing about it is I'm going to bet that almost everybody, when I said related employment, thought employed related. It's not the same thing. And if you saw my board presentation last week, you heard me say employed related was 76%. And that's also true. The difference is here we only have, this is based on all of our graduates and not just those that have jobs. So this actually makes less sense than the way we do it in Wisconsin. So, but that metric is different. And interestingly, the brown, we're actually above the median in terms of students continuing their education. I think that might be something that surprises people. So just so this is now, you'll notice the color scheme is different. That's because this is only us. I didn't give us any of the benchmarks on this one because there's already a lot of stuff going on. So the orange, and there's a corresponding color line for the percentile rank. The green here is employment satisfaction from the employer follow-up. When we had to do this, we were still collecting the data from the last one. So look in the spring for a new employer, but we didn't feel like we should report the same data 5 years in a row, so next year we'll do this one again. That's a nice thing about it, voluntary. We can choose not to do a particular metric if we don't have new data to report. Nope, I'm just going to show you this first. So the next one that's coming up is enrollment. So I showed you some of these before. Are they green, yellow, or blue on enrollment? Okay, so in enrollment, there's a couple, there's actually two correct answers, depending on what kind of enrollment you're talking about. So for this case, if we're looking at our fall enrollment for full-time students, in orange, we fall like at about the 30th percentile, so that's blue. We're kind of average on that. Last year, we were on the high side for part-time enrollment, but one of the problems is that this is a year behind our iPads. So I've actually gone and put the iPads numbers I showed you earlier on here, and as you can see, we're about to see a big drop-off. So that's not going to stay. However, what you also get is non-credit enrollment. And in our non-credit enrollment, we are up in the 85th percentile. So if you said green, you're correct. You just may not have known you were talking about non-credit enrollment. And otherwise, blue would be the best answer. Next up, student satisfaction with WCTC. This is taken from the Noel Levitz that we do every year. Green card, yellow card, blue card. Lots of green cards. That is absolutely correct. WCTC always is in the 70th to 80th percentile on student satisfaction, whether it's meeting expectations, overall experience, or what here, roll here again. Fall to fall persistence rates. Okay, I'm just going to say this quickly. They do it differently in NCCBP. If you're a graduate, you're not included at all. So it's only persistence for students that didn't graduate. It gives us numbers that are a lot smaller than when we do it the other way. So knowing that, are we good at this? Are we average at this? Or are we not so good? Okay. We're actually pretty good in fall to fall persistence. Probably a blue card is the best answer, but we are here in the 75th. You could probably go green on this as well. I think I may have put green on the official score. I think I gave ourselves the benefit of the doubt just because. So 72nd percentile or something. So pretty good. And the other thing to point out is that it's actually gotten much better since about 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, at least in relation to other schools. So fall to fall persistence is something we do fairly well. How about fall to spring persistence now? So it's the same thing, only it's 1 semester instead of a full year. So you would think perhaps that in order to get from fall to fall, you have to stay to spring. But actually, we don't do anywhere near as well at fall to spring persistence. That's an average. And I think the reason for that is something I showed you earlier. A lot of students graduate from short-term certificates. And in NCCBP, they don't get counted. So we just don't have as many students that we can count anymore because we've graduated a bunch of them. All right, so course withdrawal rates. Few people have heard these numbers before. This has always been our biggest Achilles heel at the college. This is something we have struggled with, is course withdrawal rates. We have a 13.8% withdrawal rate for all courses. That's 85th percentile. For online courses, 26%. That's in the 95th percentile. Now, 95th percentile, yes, that's a high number, except withdrawal is bad. So we want this to be a small number. So in this case, a big percentile is a bad thing. Okay, so we have had this also where about twice as many students are withdrawing from online courses as other courses. But this is not that different. This tells us that that's the case at most colleges, that there's online students are more likely to be withdrawing. Okay, so if you don't withdraw, how do students do? And by what I mean is, how many students end up getting passing grades, C or better grades, in courses if they didn't withdraw? Okay, I see a lot of blue. This is a solid green for WCTC. If we keep them in classes, we do very well with them. 90% of them end up getting C's or better. That's in the 90th percentile. And then we kind of put those two together so that now of all the students that enrolled, how many of them end up. And here you can see that puts us somewhere more in the middle because you take a kind of number we did badly on and mix it with one we did really good on. Okay, now, do we do a lot of online courses? Let's call that green. We could argue whether that's green or not, but let's call that green. Do we do a lot of online courses or not very many at all or somewhere in between? Okay, the answer is that we do very little online courses. Last year, 5.6% of our credit courses were offered online. That puts us in the bottom 5% in NCCBP. All right, and then the last benchmark is actually 3 benchmarks because it's remedial education, and there's 3 subject areas. So I'll let you sort of think about that a little bit. But we have writing, reading, and math, and I'm out of time, so I'm going to just jump ahead. So I've kind of color-coded the numbers here for you that we find the same pattern we do for our other courses, in that high withdrawal rates, that's not so good. Pretty good success rates, you might make this one green. And then you get something, for the most part, that falls kind of in between. Not so good on the reading side here. So reading, we're going to have to give a yellow card to. But for math and writing, there's another step, which is after they've passed the remedial course, and in this case, remedial specifically means general college courses, which is why it says GC on here. After they've passed those courses, then how do they do in the class that's the first course of their program? And in writing, we actually find students that took the general college writing course outperform students in our direct admits. So we clearly have a green card for the writing component of general college courses. Math, this was not so good, but this was their first year of doing this. This is last year's students that went through. This is the first year of data. And the slide I showed you before, they're up 15% across the board on student success in the general college math courses. So we're going to kind of give them a little bit of leeway there. So Gary, I'll give you a blue for that, all right? All right, so here is the final kind of note. We were going to kind of have a little thing to talk about these results and so forth. Really the question we want to ask, and we don't have time to have people actually answer it, is what here surprised you? And then why did it surprise you? And what other things do you need to know? Because this is how we stand in relation to the other colleges. And if we didn't understand that this is how it fell, then what more do we need to work on to provide that? So, all right, so I'm going to finish up with our holiday.
Thank you, Victor. Excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks, Victor. This is the end of our presentation, but we do have some people who did a really great job dressing in holiday attire. Could those of you who kind of were